Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the hidden plumbing of our financial system. It's this massive, complex network that you never see, but trust me, a single clog or leak can directly impact your savings, your mortgage, and yeah, the entire stock market.
So let's kick things off with a big question. Every single day, trillions of dollars are zipping around the globe, and there's this invisible system that's supposed to keep it all flowing smoothly. But what happens when that system comes under stress? Because the forces at play here affect all of us, whether we realize it or not.
To get our heads around this, here's the plan. First, we're going to define what this financial plumbing even is. Then, we'll look at the key parts, the pipes and the tanks. After that, we'll see how the Fed tries to control the flow, why the whole system is under a lot of pressure right now, and finally, why any of this should matter to you.
Okay, first up, let's meet the people in charge, the master plumbers who are supposed to be keeping this whole thing running.
You know, the easiest way to think about all this is with a pretty simple metaphor. Just imagine the entire supply of money in the economy is water, and it's flowing through this huge complex network of plumbing. Right at the center, with a hand on every major valve, is the Federal Reserve, the Fed. They are the master plumber, and their job is to keep the pressure just right.
But here's where it gets really interesting. There isn't just one master plumber. You've got the Fed on one side, controlling things like interest rates. That's monetary policy. But on the other side, you've got the government, controlling taxes and spending. That's fiscal policy. So you've got two different teams trying to manage the same system, and, well, sometimes their goals don't exactly line up, which can put a ton of stress on the pipes.
All right, so we know who the plumbers are. Now let's look at the actual pipes and the storage tanks that make up this whole system.
Okay, the big one, the most important piece of the puzzle, is commercial bank reserves. Think of this as the main water supply for the entire financial system. It's not physical cash, it's all electronic deposits that banks, like Chase or Bank of America, hold at the Fed. This is the good stuff, the safest, most liquid money in the entire system. Next up, you've got something called the TGA, or Treasury General Account. This is basically the U.S. government's giant checking account, and it's also held at the Fed. When you pay taxes or when the government sells bonds, the money flows right in here. The catch is that its balance can swing by hundreds of billions of dollars in just a few weeks. It's a huge wild card in the whole system.
And then there's this really critical piece of machinery called the Overnight Reverse Repo Facility. Let's just call it the ONRRP. For years, this thing acted like a massive overflow tank. If there was way too much cash sloshing around, the Fed could use this to soak it up overnight. It was a critical safety valve, preventing the pressure from getting too high in the pipes.
So let's see how this all works together in the real world. Imagine the government needs a ton of cash. It sells a flood of new bonds. Investors, they use their money to buy them, and all that cash gets funneled into the government's TGA account. What's the result? Well, the main water supply for the whole system, those bank reserves, it starts to drain away.
So, if the government can just suck all this money out of the system, what can the Fed do about it, right? What are their tools for controlling the flow? What are their main valves?
Well, the Fed has two massive levers it can pull. The first is called Quantitative Easing, or QE. That's when the Fed buys bonds from banks, which is like opening the main spigot and pumping fresh cash directly into the system. The opposite is Quantitative Tightening, or QT. That's when the Fed basically closes the valve, letting its bonds expire, which pulls cash out of the system.
But it's not just about how much money's in the system. It's also about the price of that money. And the Fed controls that too. They do it by paying banks interest on the reserves they hold. Now, think about it. Why would a bank lend money to anyone else for less than they can get risk-free from the Fed? They wouldn't. So this interest rate, the IORB, it basically sets the floor for short-term rates across the entire economy.
Okay, so this brings us to the whole reason we're talking about this today. Because the plumbing system we just described, it has gone through a massive, fundamental change over the last year. Something big is different.
Remember that giant overflow tank we mentioned, the ONRRP? Well, for the last few years, it was absolutely enormous. It was the system's #1 shock absorber. If the government suddenly needed $1 trillion, the money could come from this buffer without immediately straining the core pipes. It was basically a firewall.
But that buffer, it's gone. I mean, just look at this. The ONRRP, which held over $2.5 trillion at its peak, has been almost completely drained. That is a multi-trillion-dollar cushion that was protecting the system,
and it's just vanished.
And this isn't some small technical tweak. The analysis is pretty clear. When you hear that the ONRRP balance is near zero, what it means is that the financial system's main shock absorber is gone. The firewall that was protecting those core pipes has been completely used up.
So what does all this plumbing talk actually mean for the real world, for the markets, and more importantly, for you and your portfolio? Let's connect the dots.
Well, without that giant safety cushion, any new stress, whether it's the government needing cash fast or the Fed continuing to tighten, now puts direct pressure on the core of the system, those bank reserves. There's no buffer to absorb the shock anymore, and that makes the whole system more fragile, more brittle, more likely to crack under pressure.
And this fragility creates real-world signals that professional investors watch like hawks. When the plumbing is under stress, you'll see it in these key overnight lending rates, like SOFR, spiking for no reason. You'll see it in more market volatility. These are the red flags, the warning lights on the dashboard, telling you that the pipes might be starting to clog up.
And all of this leaves us with the big, multi-trillion-dollar question. For the first time in years, the system is operating without its main safety net. The pressure is building. And the question on everyone's mind as we look ahead is, which part of this incredibly complex system is going to be the first to crack?